All right. Hey, everybody. This is Ryan Steva, and this is the Resilient Living podcast where we're building resilient communities here in our local area, as well as hoping to help you build a resilient community as well. I'm here with Jared Wilson. He's with Resilient Living. And today we're going to be kind of talking over being prepared and aware, just in general for life, for the things that may come, because there's always going to be hiccups and things that we run across in life. So it's really good to be prepared. And Jared, though he probably would not uh, bill himself this way, I believe is actually a bit of an expert in preparedness and being ready for whatever life brings. And that's what his business is selling amazing goods that he's figured out for that. So, Jared, welcome. I'm excited to be talking with you today.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. And you're overselling it.
That's what I do. No,
I appreciate it.
genuinely, Jared knows his stuff, and I know sometimes he feels like he doesn't, but a lot of times it's an interesting point because as we get more skilled at what we do, we start to realize how big the gaps that we don't know are. And so it's actually oftentimes the expert who is aware at how little they actually know. And it's the person who's just getting into something who thinks they know all of it. So, yeah, anyways, the humility of knowing that there's a lot more to learn is important.
Sure, sure. Man, we gotta get you on the screen here.
Yeah.
I'm tired of looking at my own ugly mug.
Forgive us as we figure out some of the technicalities here. This is our second show. We're trying to do live stream, and apparently we are.
There we
There we
are.
go. There I'm at. There
Ha
we are. Much better. So
ha.
I'm now no longer a disembodied voice for those watching the video. Um, so yeah, let's get into it, Jared.
Oh,
What are some of the things that you can tell us about um, preparedness? I guess I'm thinking, what are like your maybe just bullet point top 4 or 5 things that people should be thinking about, like shelter or whatever. What are like the top 5 that you would throw out there as being things that people should be thinking about initially as they start thinking about preparing?
sure. So a lot of this really comes down to your setting. So um what are you being prepared for? Are you being prepared at home? Are you prepared in your vehicle while you travel? There's a lot of different nuances and aspects to that. But in general, for home, I I always promote water preparations. Water is one of those things that life doesn't go on for very long without good, clean water. You look at any third world country, that's the number one priority in life is getting access to water and getting it as clean as possible. So in my mind, that's one of the highest levels. I mean, we'll dive down into some of the other ones like, heat and cooking, other stuff. But water filtration systems is really, really high on that list.
Okay. So water would be kind of your at least top, your first procurement, first thing you're
Definitely.
thinking about. Um, and in my experience, water can actually be one of the easiest ones to deal with. So I
The
let's just
irony, especially
yeah,
here in the South, where we have all these rainstorms. If you have
right.
any type of a roof, you've got water.
Yeah.
It's just a
Yeah.
matter of catching it, keeping it, and then cleaning it.
Sure. So why don't you step us through those 3 potential options for water, as well as maybe just thinking if you're planning ahead, how could you store water in the first place that might get you through where it might not even need filtration?
Sure. So, one thing, and we talked about the in our last podcast was about water catchment systems like barrels. It's a great system because you can implement that fairly readily with pretty easy, common, components. Um, you can use it for watering your garden or whatever innocuous, aspect, but then you have it. if you need it, it's there. You already have that infrastructure built. Already have a vessel that has, say, it's a small one at 55 gallons. That's a sufficient amount for a while for a family. So that's an easy one, and it's already in use. Like you could be using it for your garden, for your livestock, for whatever. So I always like that's the next thing on from my list of things to do is get a rain barrel on our house.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can always increase that size too, especially if you're
Exactly.
starting at 55-gallon drum, you
Right.
know, when
Yeah,
you
you don't have
have
to go to
the
full like IBC tote. You
right.
can start with a small barrel.
Yeah. No, it's great to be able to start with something small. And you're right, 55 gallons if you've got a Berkey or a Lexapure or whatever,
Right.
that's going to get you through quite a decent amount of time, even with a family if you're being careful with it and it's just your drinking water.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So then comes managing the water itself. Anytime we have long-term storage, we have potential, algae growth, we have, bacteria that can develop within that ecosystem that will develop, unless we treat it. So we have, chemical sterilization that is an option. Um, we can, if you have contaminants in suspension in the water, you're going to need to get that out because the first thing that's going to mess up any water filtration system is going to be those suspended contaminants. Any
Yep.
type of larger particles is going to be the first thing that's going to plug up your water filter.
So would
So
that
get
be like a flocculant, or what would you typically use to remove the suspended?
Yeah. Yeah, so Procter& and Gamble makes an excellent little, product. It's a little packet. Each packet will treat 2.5 gallons, a piece, so which is a reasonable amount for, a family application. You throw that in there, it attaches to all of those pieces, and they just drop to the bottom, and now you have not sterilized, not filtered, but you have, particulate free water. Now you can deal with it. Now you can go through the process of running it through your Berkey or your Alexapure.
Sure.
Good luck finding a Berkey filter. Um, I've heard
Unfortunately,
that
yes.
they spooled up a subsidiary and that they're selling them from Britain.
Yeah,
I don't
it's
know if that's
Burrow. You
is that what
spell it
it okay,
Bourx or something like that. I
nice.
can't. I'd have to look it up. But yes, yeah, there is a new company doing it.
Stupid EPA. Anyway, so yeah, so now that you've got this, filtered, you can just drink it. There's also chemical sterilization. You have UV sterilization if you want to go all high tech, and we can set up a solar system and have a pump and a UV light, and
Sure.
you can clean it. There's a lot, there's several different methods that you can use, whether it's just a silly life straw or something more substantial. Yeah, no, you can definitely,
Awesome.
and that like you said, that 55 gallons, that goes quite a long ways if you're judicious.
Yeah. What about just storing, like getting some type of pre-bottled water and having some of that on a shelf in your house? Do you recommend that in any cases?
I do, but not for long-term use. The
Hmm.
the the chemicals that leach into your water from a lot of those, especially the cheaper plastics, is nasty
Yeah.
stuff. It really is gross. So there are some good manufacturers, and I highly recommend doing the research and finding good manufacturers of BPA free containers for long-term storage.
Yeah.
Don't just go to Sam's Club and buy a flat of bottles and expect
Right.
that to be decent after 6-8 months. That's not going to be good.
And my understanding is that the harder the plastic is, the less BP whatever, because
Yes,
BPA is one chemical.
it is.
There's multiple BP
Yes.
varieties or biphenyl, and those are softeners. So the harder the plastic is, likely the less of that type of thing is in it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
it's not a hard and fast rule, but um, okay. Well, is there anything else about water storage or catchment that you want to kind of cover on a high level?
Don't spend a fortune. Start incrementally. Do something today that you didn't do yesterday.
Hmm.
You don't need to go out and spend thousands of dollars, and then that is going to be a reoccurring thing through this whole talk is don't go spending, tens of thousands of dollars on all of this stuff. Just pick one thing,
Yep.
change today something you didn't do yesterday.
Yeah, and I would say, correct me if I'm wrong here, but look for value and not cheap. Is that
Very much
a good
so.
way to put it?
Yeah, there are several things where it's, buy once, cry once. It is worth spending a little bit extra of getting quality. Now that doesn't necessarily mean, because the other side of the equation is there's a big name and it's a very expensive product. That doesn't mean it's necessarily better.
Sure.
Um, there's a lot of companies that they're just a name and they're just rebranding somebody else's something.
Right. Yeah, that's their whole thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Jared, what would be kind of the next thing that you would look at after water as being a priority to start preparing for?
So for house or home use, I'm probably going to jump down probably almost to communications, if not community. There's if we're in a vehicle, then and or out away from home, it's a different setup. But for home, communication is really important to me. I have I've got radios, I've got walkie talkies. I talk all over the farm to my kids, to my wife. If anything ever happens, I can just jump on the radio and everybody knows what's going on. And it doesn't have to be as fancy as having a ham radio
Right.
or a little blister pack GMRS, FRS, whatever from Costco, which are for small applications, fantastic little you know devices. They work. Um, just having communication, the idea of communication. So whether it's like a 333 rule where you just know, hey, if something bad happens, I'm going to be on the radio at 3 o'clock for 3 minutes. Where you have this idea is like, I know that if somebody's going to get a hold of me, it's during this time for this duration of time. So we're not wasting resources like batteries um,
Right.
to try and, get access to somebody that, they're busy or they are whatever. So having that plan in place ahead of time is incredibly important because when emergencies happen, they're never when we plan them to be because they're
Right.
an emergency and things can go south very fast in very, very bad ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Communications is, I mean, how can you do anything without it?
Hmm.
And I suppose the only other option you have is pre communications, which would
Yep.
be what, contingencies?
Yeah. Yeah. Having those plans in place, like if something happens, this is our meeting point. Do whatever you can to get here. Like if, like, say I was, at home and Meg was at work, halfway between us is my grandma's house. So, hey, if something happens, head to grandma's.
Right.
Solid point of commonality that we all know exactly where it is and we know how to get there. Having those kinds of plans and having those conversations ahead of time is incredibly important to be on the same page so that in the emergency we can just nothing else matters. We're going here. This is what
Yeah.
we're doing.
So for local, GMRS or other communications, do you have like a kind of a go-to device that you like to use?
So I've been using the Baofeng UV17R Plus. Good little handheld, fairly inexpensive, tri-bands, so includes air traffic control frequencies, so I can monitor, if there is any kind of air traffic. You're not going to be talking over huge distances, especially Middle Tennessee. We got these things called hills, and they get in the way. Rule of thumb, it's what you can see plus 10%. So it covers my little valley here. Great.
Sure.
But without a repeater, I'm not going to get out of this valley. But for being in here, my whole family, we're good.
Yeah.
Um, that's one thing that I really have been kind of trying to promote in the shop when I'm selling these is we need to have as a community in this little valley a frequency so that
Sure.
when there's something bad goes on, everybody knows that they can turn on their radio. They can go to that frequency and we can talk. Hey,
Yeah.
so and so, they've got a tree down on their property. Hey, they need medical help. Hey, does anybody have water? Anybody have food? Whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and that comes back to that pre-planning. Let's make a plan ahead of time so that when we have, this already established.
I love that. And, something we should talk about maybe offline, but I've come up with a way to use direct solar. So just a small solar panel with
Yeah.
there's these really cool little battery packs. They're inexpensive and you can actually hook them up to a GMRS repeater.
Yeah.
And so you can set that thing on the highest point on somebody's property, never have to touch it again. And it now can broadcast that signal to everybody. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
lots of
And
cool things
there's
you can do.
Oh yeah, because you can do like a mesh-tastic node that way. There's a lot of communication protocols that you can use. And if you really want to get fancy, you can get into like ATAC and being able to like share, GPS coordinates and have everybody in real time identified on maps. There's a lot you can really. It's one of those fields that it's a deep rabbit hole. Like it's a really deep one.
Yeah, listening to ham guys makes my brain go numb, and it's hard to do. Um,
Oh yeah.
cool. Well, what about you'd mentioned community? You've kind of touched on it, and you said it's pretty close to communication. Can you explain a little bit about uh, community in a preparedness event?
Yeah, so I mean, kind of piggybacking off of the, communication side of things and having that frequency that everybody knows is just knowing your neighbor. Um, if you know your neighbor, if you know the resources and they know you, that's incredibly important in a disaster to be able to like I know that I can go to my neighbor and he's got a spot in his garage or he's got a place in his basement that I can go. We've got neighbors who don't have a basement, and anytime that there's a threat of a tornado, we let them know, hey,
Yeah.
our basement is available to you. Please come. We'd love to have you. And that's just one of those things that, last time we were talked a little bit about this, the resources that we bring to the table and that nobody has it all together. Nobody has the what was it, the pencil, right?
Hmm.
Nobody can make the pencil. I may be, a metal worker, but I don't have the greenest of thumbs. Um, I do have a basement though, and that so if somebody doesn't, then I can provide that. So having that community, having those people know that you are there for them, knowing that they're there for you. I mean, it's great. Like I know that I could show up at your doorstep and you'd be there and you'd help me, but you're a bit of a drive for me.
Yeah.
Having that local community, even for me, like going up to Cookville, that's still a bit of a drive. And if I couldn't drive, if I had to walk, that's a bit of a walk.
Absolutely.
So having that literal physical local community is super, super important.
Yeah. What you're talking about reminds me of, I was sitting in my office one day and I get a text, and it was like 9 p.m. at night. So it's dark in the middle of winter. And I get this text from my neighbor, trees down over the road. We're on a little one lane dead end. And I look out of my office and I see like 12 cars backed up. So I
Oh
run to my
no.
shop, get one of my multiple chainsaws and go cut the tree apart. 2, 3 minutes later, everybody's driving through,
Yeah.
and I don't have a basement, but the same neighbor who texted me has a basement. It's so if we had a lot of big storms rolling through, we could go over there and just hang out for a bit. We've got rapport built with our neighbors so that if I needed to or they needed to, any of us needed to get into each other's houses, we can. And so if there's any need for anything, it's immediately uh able to be taken care of. So yeah, that
Exactly.
that community is so important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, you mentioned you put together some notes, so I'm reading through them here. One of them you mentioned location, and I think what I'm getting from that is um, when we're thinking about preparedness, we need to think about our location. Could you touch on that a bit?
Well, yeah. So, okay. So I grew up on the West Coast. And in that one, it was really threat oriented. What kinds of negative conditions could we find ourselves in? And so on the West Coast, we'd have different kinds of storms. We'd have fire threats. I'm very familiar with fire threats. Versus being out here, middle Tennessee, we have tornadoes and straight line winds. That wasn't a thing. Like, I don't ever remember having those types of threats growing up. So being aware, like if I lived in Louisiana, I'm going to prep very, very differently than if I grew up in upstate Washington or something like that.
Right.
So it's just a matter of being prepared for the climate that you're in because and the season that you're in. Being in Minnesota, you're going to have different things prepared um, in fall versus being in Florida in spring.
Right.
So just being aware, and this was more pertinent to like travel. If you do find yourself in another circumstance in a different place, is thinking it through, like where am I going to be? What is the potential, temperature swings? What would a night look like in the high Arizona desert as opposed to, so yeah, location is very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I know your story is that you came from California where there was major fire issues, which I think we should talk a little bit more,
Yeah,
actually drill into the fire part. But yeah, here most of what we're looking at is flooding and tornadic activity here in Tennessee,
yeah,
right? High
basically.
winds, things like that. I'm sure there's a few others that we could probably tack in there, but that's what most people are probably going to be the most concerned about. So if somebody's in a fire area, what are some of the well, yeah, what are some of the things that they're going to want to think about as opposed to tornadoes?
Sure. Yeah, so yeah, growing up in Paradise, um, and then evacuating Paradise in the midst of a rather substantial fire. Um, it is boy, um it's a hard one. Having um the mindset of sorry,
Maybe let me rephrase
go
because I
ahead.
know it was a hard situation for you and your entire family.
Yeah.
So maybe what has changed in your mindset since then as far as preparing for various events?
Mm, sure. Okay, I like that. Okay, so my vehicles. So I had built this really cool, off-roading truck, and this was my I can get anywhere vehicle, and it was all set up. It burnt. I drove my little stupid Volvo out of the fire.
That sucks.
I know. All of my preps, every one of them, but from firearms to food, everything, all of it burnt. Um, it really came down to don't put all your eggs in one basket. It really came down to now I don't typically travel anywhere without something on my person, something in a backpack, and then my backpacks are scalable. So depending on if I'm going by myself or if I'm going with my family, and
Mm-hmm.
then also taking into account distance. So if it's more than a 20-mile distance, my preps change, and that's mostly a result of the getting out of the fire.
Sure.
Um, and it's a bit of a trauma response.
Yeah.
I realize, but
Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad trauma response though, at least because
no,
it's not going to hurt anything. Sometimes our trauma
exactly.
responses make us make bad decisions that hurt us in the long run. But that the only way that you could claim that it hurts you is you spent a little bit of extra time and money having the things that you need for if something happens again. So,
Well, yeah, and
yeah.
and we've talked about this. It's a hope-based preparedness, not
Mhm.
a fear-based preparedness. I'm not doing it because I'm afraid of that. I'm doing it because I want to have the hope in the moment when it happens that I am actually prepared for this. I have the experience, I have the equipment, and I can actually accomplish this now. as opposed to last time.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up an interesting point because if you're prepared, that you're like the person in the plane that's put on their oxygen mask. And now, I mean, I kind of hate that analogy, but I don't know of another one,
It's a
right?
good one.
Because
Yeah,
the plane's going down, so I'm not sure
right.
that it's helpful. But you're the person who's prepared yourself, so now you can be a blessing to others. Um,
Yes, and that
just
that is really the core of my intent. Whether okay, so I happen to carry personally when I go out. I don't carry um, to protect myself. I know where I'm going. I don't care if I die. I care about my family. I care about those
sure.
around me. And that's why I carry. Um, and that's why I prepare. Okay, so can we jump into medical real quick,
Yeah, let's do it.
or not so real quick?
No,
Okay,
I hear a segue coming, so go for it.
so this last week was a very interesting week. I don't know if you saw it in the news or not, but there was a really bad car accident.
No, I didn't.
Um, so that I'm sitting in my shop, and Hansel Moore, who is the post commander for my American Legion post, comes in. Now he doesn't, he lives nearby, but doesn't work nearby. He works in McMinnville, and he just stopped by. And this is a total God thing, right? He just stopped by, and we're just talking, and another fellow Navy vet pops in, and we're just sitting around talking, and we hear brakes lock up and a thunk, a very, very bad thunk. Hansel is a 30-year vet he's a trauma nurse.
Wow.
He is on his feet and out that door so fast, and I'm grabbing everything off of my wall, like every med kit, everything that I've got. I'm like, all right, this is literally what we're prepared for, right? We get out there. A Dodge Durango had turned in front of a log hauler and got T-boned
Oh
right in front of my
no.
shop.
Wow.
A mama and some munchkins, right? Okay. So we get out there. We are literally the first on the scene because it happened 25 seconds ago.
Right.
We get in there. We've got multiple people or multiple individuals who are non-responsive, not breathing. So we get in there. We get them breathing. We get them stabilized. We get them braced. I'm working on a door to try and free up another kid who's gotten pinched between the door and the seat. We've got mama in the front seat. We've got, we're on her trying to get her settled down so that she doesn't damage herself any further. Like we had all of this stuff happen in like it was preparedness in real time.
Wow.
And this really highlights how quickly things can go so very, very badly,
Yeah.
and the incredible need for training. We You can't get the training, unless you get the training before, you're not going to be any good during, right?
Right.
And so here we have these multiple individuals who they're okay. I mean, that they're, as far as I know, I haven't heard anything in the last couple of days. I've been trying to find out their condition, but so
Right.
I don't know. But there four life flights to get them all out, but they were alive.
Yeah, it's an insane story, and it covers like so many of the topics that we're hitting here.
I know,
Right.
that's why
It's got
I want to talk about
medical,
this.
it's got community, it's got communication. Like if
Yeah,
you didn't have the community around you of these guys that you've been building a relationship who are just, stopping in to hang out every day
right.
or whenever they do, like these people likely would not have made it or would have been in a lot worse shape. And
Two of them probably would not have. Yeah,
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 I mean that's amazing and incredible that you and these other guys not only had the training, you had all the equipment, you had the without the even if you know technically what you're supposed to do without that training, especially in a hard situation, which military guys, that's kind of what you get. Um,
yes.
you would have been
Unfortunately,
flustered and overwhelmed, and I don't know. I just think that's such a beautiful, amazing story of hope that we have in preparing rather than the fear in preparing.
Yes, and so that's really what kind of what I wanted to drive back is training. Get training, get CPR certified. It's not that difficult. Seek out training. I went. The adage is, we don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training.
Yeah.
I think it was a Greek philosopher that said it, and it's absolutely true. I can read a book 1,000 times, and intellectually, oh yeah, I know how to. But when you're in that circumstance, everything that you thought you knew goes out the window.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you can actually develop the muscle memory, really. Um, all of the nice thoughts in the world don't mean much.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the other one is, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah. Expand that one a little bit for me if you could.
So if you're not making a plan in the preparatory sense, if you're not making a plan, you're literally planning to fail. There's no way that you can overcome that failure to plan like you can overcome if you make a plan. Just make some kind of, and that comes back to the communication, that comes back to medical and shelter, fire, whatever it is. Make a plan and learn, get experience, get education, do whatever you can. But it comes down to making that plan, not just having the thought of, oh, it would be nice if, or oh yeah. They did a survey and they asked, I don't remember how many thousands of guys, could you land a plane? If you needed to, could you land a plane? And like 97% of them are like, oh yeah, I could do it.
Yeah, definitely.
Really? Like, really? Could you
Yeah.
actually?
Did they even bother asking what kind of plane?
Nope.
They're like,
I know, I got it.
Cessna
Sure.
747. Sure.
We'll be
Yeah, it
good.
doesn't matter.
Yoke down. We're good. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So what you're saying is they've
That
planned to fail.
overconfidence. Yeah, exactly. That
Yeah.
overconfidence in our innate abilities. Like, yes, there will be outliers that will succeed in spite of themselves. Absolutely. Don't rely on that. Can't rely on that. You need to make a plan. You need to get experience and education and training in all of these areas. And I don't want that to be overwhelming. Because that can seem like a lot.
Yeah.
Um, like I said earlier, is pick one thing. Just pick
Right.
one thing today that you can do that you didn't do yesterday. Something you didn't know yesterday. Hey, I'm going to learn how to use a ferrocerium rod and start a fire. Hey, I'm going to learn first aid. Hey, I'm whatever.
Hmm.
Just pick something. Make a list. And that's kind of what I'm hoping that this podcast kind of does is it makes a mental list for everybody to oh, I should think about that. I should think about water filtration for my family. I should think about self-defense or shelter, whatever. So yeah, that's my story.
Let me put you on the spot. Thank you so much for
Oh,
sharing that story
yeah.
because I had no idea. I don't watch the news or really listen to the news at all. Um, and so I'm unless it I don't know somehow comes across my Facebook feed, which I also don't really use. I'm kind of like I'm a Facebook drug dealer. Same
You
with
post and
TikTok and
that's it.
YouTube. Yeah, it's I don't use my product.
That's
Um,
funny.
I I just
Oh,
send it out there. But anyways, thank you for sharing that story because I was completely unaware that that happened, and it truly is a really sobering reason that we prepare and why we're hopeful when we do it rather than I think a lot of people look at medical preparedness and is a scary thing like and
mm,
it forces them to think about oh this could happen and then it's I don't want to deal with
yeah,
um with this situation and so I think a lot of people actually shy away from it because it seems scary and seems overwhelming. And I think your suggestion of take on one thing, learn about it, figure it out, get it squared away enough that it's okay, like your water, get some
yeah,
type of water solution squared away, and then move on to the next thing because you can't do all of it at once or you won't do any of it properly.
right.
So, yeah, I think that's a valuable lesson. Um, we've talked about water medical communications things like that What
Mhm.
about shelter?
Yeah, so that was that, and we can kind of almost segue right into that one from this. In my vehicles, I almost always have some form of an impromptu shelter. Now that could be something silly like just a poncho with
Hmm.
some paracord or something like that, or like a full blown, tent or a tarp or something. Um, okay, so dad to dad, you wanna make your kid's day. Take them out and make them a tent out of a tarp and start a fire in the yard. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, like, my boy, he still talks about like, one day, I had just gotten these silly little emergency poncho tarp things
Yeah.
in that I wanted to test out for the shop. And I'm like, "Hey, bud, let's go down to the trees, and we're gonna experiment. We're gonna play around with these things." And so I had some paracord, I had, freeze-dried meal, I had some fire starting equipment, stuff like that. We throw it in my backpack, we head down there, and we make an impromptu shelter. We make you know, a Dakota fire hole, we boil our water, we make our freeze-dried meal. It was just we spent a couple hours down there and had a blast. That was 2 years ago. He's still
Hmm.
talking about that, like, "Dad, when can we go back down and we can do that again?"
That's great.
And what was great to me was it resharpened up those abilities. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, yeah, that's right. You have to do it this way. You need to tie it with this type of a knot. You need to, think about, the way that the smoke is going to go and what direction you're facing. Where's the wind coming from? And he had a blast doing it. He learns a lot. I would fairly confidently say he could probably do most everything that I did that day now,
And
2
he's
years
going to
later.
remember that for his life too,
And
right?
he's gonna remember it for life.
Yeah.
So and that's just one of those things, like, go and get a couple and that's for want of $50 worth of whatever, between a mountain house, freeze-dried meal, a decent tarp, some rope, whatever. Go out in your yard, make a tent, make a fire, have some
Yeah.
fun, and teach your kids some confidence that in an emergency, "No, no, you've got this. You know how to do this. We did this before, remember?" It because that hope is so critical in an emergency.
Hmm.
When I was looking in the window of this car, the one thing that those people needed more than anything was hope. It's
Right.
gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. We're gonna get you out. You're gonna be okay. And that's the same thing and that's the hope is really, what drives my preparedness is that, "No, no, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna get through this.
Right.
We've already prepared for this."
Yeah. Head in the sand is not is not hopeful.
No, no.
It's yeah, it's ignorant is what it
Yes.
is. And to
It's
be honest,
dangerous.
yeah, and I don't want people to think as they listen or watch this that like I'm 100% prepared or you're 100% prepared.
No.
I'm absolutely not. There's several of the things that we've already talked about where I'm like, I'm just gonna bug in for everything, right? I've got everything right here on my property.
Right.
Or, I use my truck for work, and so I've got so many tools and odd things in there that I could make a shelter out of, my five
Mhm.
coats that are in the back seat.
Yeah.
That's not really properly prepared. And I think one thing that probably you and I both are um, feel is when we talk about topics like this, because nobody's really 100% prepared or properly prepared for every situation. It's it's easy to get that imposter syndrome of
Mm. Mhm.
we're
Mhm.
talking about this. I know about these things, but I haven't.
Right.
I'm looking at your list. I haven't done half these things that I need to. Right.
Sure.
Um, like I'm pretty good about figuring out how to get energy to my house in a power outage. Right.
Yeah.
I've got a pile of solar panels sitting around, and I know how to wire things up, even if it's not safe or right.
Yep.
I can make it happen. But there's a lot of this stuff that I'm not prepared for. So I'm just saying that so that whoever's listening is um, aware that this is a long process, and it can be a fun process if you approach it properly. So
Yes, absolutely. It should be a fun process because this is the opportunity we have to have fun with it. In
Hmm.
an emergency, that's not the time necessarily.
It's not fun.
Although it's a lot more enjoyable when you've already figured all the details out
Yeah.
to do that in the
Speaking
emergency.
speaking of that, fire
Yeah.
is one of those things that like humans have always had, right?
Yeah, right?
We've always had fire to look at. It mesmerizes us. And that's one of the things that we really need in preparedness is understanding how to harness, how to start, how to tell me about fire and preparedness. I don't feel like I'm as versed in this as I should be.
Sure. I mean, like, so I usually carry multiple ways of starting a fire. Um, and that's from being a scout. I don't know, from my dad, that we would just go out in the woods and we'd, fish for something. We'd catch the fish and we'd cook the fish. I don't know. We just start it. And so I typically have a lighter on me. I might have a magnifying glass on me. A ferrocerium rod. Ferro rods are very. It used to be super rare. Now they've become like this really super common thing. Until I started this business, I had no idea. I was like, wait, you all know what a ferro rod is? Like, what? Really?
Other people have
I
heard
thought
of this.
I thought I was the weird one that use things like this. I mean, like you go old school, go flint and steel. Um, or like start a fire with the friction fire like that. I think every boy has always tried to start the friction fire, and none of us have ever succeeded. uh, I did
Yeah,
one time, but I cheated. I chucked it up in my I and I used the it worked. I
I
mean,
mean,
started a
we all
fire.
now have battery powered drills, so
Right,
it's not so much of a cheat anymore. Um,
exactly.
yeah,
But no, and it's just one of those things, like, it's always a good thing just to have the ability to start a fire. um just whether it's to sterilize water or to comfort, like you said, like sometimes we just need a fire, we just need a warm meal, because we don't have the opportunity to have a home cooked meal, but at least we can have a warm meal. So being able to start that, and going back to having fun with it. Next time you go to light a fire, have your s'mores on a summer evening, have fun with it. Start it differently. Don't
yeah,
just use your matches. Like, hey, I'm gonna try something. I'm gonna try this ferro rod and see what happens. Like, oh, that takes some work. Learning how to make a feather stick. How you cut. Do partial cuts, and so you have all these little tendrils that catch more readily.
sure.
It's
Yeah, each
you
time
know,
you do it, you try a new
yeah,
technique with it. Yeah, I like that.
absolutely.
I think the other thing on fire that I like to think about is because I I prepare more for being at my house, though
Mm-hmm.
I have some locations I can go to, but
Yeah.
um I think more about what I can do at my house. And one of those things is if we have a long term power outage, is there enough firewood to, even if it's just a crappy fireplace with that's really inefficient, being able to sit next to a fire and warm yourself could be the difference between being extremely uncomfortable and being relatively comfortable and making it through.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I don't really wanna get into the whole, bug in versus bug out
Yeah. No,
argument, but
too much in the
no,
weeds
but
for
you're
now.
yeah, exactly. But no, you're absolutely right. It is, having that comfort, and having, like I said, having warm meals is a really big deal.
Yeah. Um, Something we haven't touched on yet is energy.
Yeah.
I know that's a pretty big topic, but can you kind of hit the highlights on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so my approach to that one was there's lots of different ways that you can, I won't say create energy because you can't create. Never mind. Um, but that you can harness energies.
Details.
Yeah, I know, right? Whether it's through solar, like what you've got, some awesome setups, or hydroelectrics. There's some pretty cool, home built hydro systems that are pretty rad.
Yeah,
Um, Wind power. There's there's definitely different options. I mean, I've even seen as far as like home steam generations with some really advanced
gasifiers and generators.
exactly,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And so there's a lot of, different systems that allow you to produce power. So yeah, so you definitely have different abilities, but then once you've created it, now what do you do, right? And we've
Mhm.
had this conversation, like, going using direct solar as opposed to running it through batteries and inverters and all the expensive stuff. We can just directly power. But sometimes you need to store it. Well,
Right.
okay, so what are your options for storage? So yeah, and this comes back to like your own abilities, your own knowledge, your own equipment. If you've got a whole bunch, a big old stack of DeWalt batteries, well, backfeeding a DeWalt charger off of a solar panel,
Mhm.
that's going to do you pretty well for a while.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
no,
power tools are one of the simple overlooked
they really
preparedness
are.
tools. Because
Absolutely.
you can run flashlights, you can run inverters, you can run fans, you can do so much with
Yep.
DeWalt batteries. You go and look at all the different adapters and things you can get. You can
Oh yeah.
keep your phones topped off.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a very overlooked energy source for sure. And like you said, you can charge them directly off of a solar panel if you have a couple of little pieces, which is a
Yeah.
topic for another podcast,
Yes.
but we'll
Yes.
probably cover that at some point. Um, you had mentioned we talked a bit about like uh, preparedness for emergency medical, but what about
Yeah.
preparing for or just generally doing things that keep us from needing that medical stuff in an emergency?
Yeah. An ounce of prevention is worth the pound of cure, right?
Right.
So and I am woefully, and this is where my lack of knowledge is displayed. Am just now getting into the impact, and I think this is kind of almost really where you started, the impact in our physiology of what, we are what we eat. And taking care of ourselves and not getting into that position in the first place. And so I almost can turn the the table on you and say, so what do I do?
Yeah. Well, no, that's probably you're right. This is my passion is really in this realm. And just as a simple example, and people are going to be offended by this, and they can be if they want to be, but um, type type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle illness. Like it is fully reversible. I like your face.
Ooh, mic
Yeah.
drop.
It's fully
Yes.
reversible in probably 99.8% of cases with dietary change. And that doesn't mean go follow the American Diabetic Association's guidelines. You'll just make it worse because they're in the business of selling you medications. But the reason I bring that up is if you could change your diet and actually just eat things you still enjoy, you still love, like high quality meats, veggies from your garden, things like that, and reverse that, now you don't need insulin and you can actually, you know, now if the grid goes down, your life's not in danger
Yes.
because you don't have insulin. And you obviously type 1 diabetes, totally different thing.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of diseases, hundreds of diseases that the medical industry generally does not consider curable. But just like my condition, which was hypokalemic periodic paralysis, mouthful, was considered not reversible and degenerative. I not only completely reversed it, and I have to be careful about using any words that start with a C. um I have no remaining ill effect from it, and I feel better than I did in my early 20s because I've changed diet. And
Sure.
um that's true pretty much across the board. If we can be really careful about our diet, understand some herbal remedies, things like that, it can make a huge difference in how prepared we actually are
Oh
and
yeah.
really remove dependencies on systems.
Well, and that's the thing. I don't think um a lot of people understand that most of our medicines come from herbal remedies that then get synthesized, and they get a synthetic version of that herbal solution.
Correct.
Just go find the herbal solution. They
Yeah,
don't typically have the negative side effects that the synthetic version has.
exactly. And so we've got, and to temper that a tiny bit, because I
Yeah.
totally agree. But when when you've got a headache, it's not a lack of aspirin problem.
Oh,
It's also not
yeah,
a it's also
right.
not a lack of willow bark problem, because that's a, that's a natural aspirin. That's how
Yes,
aspirin came about.
right.
So, knowing what's causing that and getting to the
Y-
bottom of it
Yeah,
through
you have a
natural
blood
means.
pressure issue. You have a,
Yeah.
yeah, whatever.
Yep. So that's, we could again go on about that for forever, but I think that we'll put a tack in it.
Sure.
Um, what about defense? Self
Yeah,
defense, home defense, training. A lot of people like to not think about this because it's like the medical thing or the emergency medical preparedness,
right.
where it's like, I don't want to think about somebody ever breaking into my house.
Yeah.
How do you start
It'll never
thinking about
happen to
that?
me.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, okay. We just had this last weekend we had a church shooting. Somebody came in, crashed a vehicle into the building, came literally gunning for the pastor and anybody who got in the way. One of the congregates who was, legally concealed carrying took care of the issue.
Hmm.
Now, does that mean that I want everybody, armed? Not necessarily, because I know a lot of people who shouldn't be.
Only if they're trained in
And
yeah.
that's exactly it's just get training, because that can take care of a lot of the issues that would otherwise have resulted from you just carrying. Yes, we in Tennessee, we can not quite, but constitutional carry. Yes, still get training, because just because you have the right to, doesn't mean that I trust you with a gun pointed in my
Right.
direction just because there's a bad guy over my shoulder. Get training, be able to actually hit what you're aiming at, be aware of what is around what you're aiming at, what is behind what you're aiming at. There's phenomenal resources everywhere. Everywhere. There are phenomenal resources that will train you on how to identify a target, how to engage the target, what to do afterwards. If you're in this local area, 580 Tactical is right down here. He's got a fantastic training course where he goes through everything scenario based. You literally are going to work out, get, where your blood is pumping, and now you have to stop and think, and then you have to
Yeah.
engage on your target, and then like all of these, which is a very good and accurate way of simulating that type of a stressful circumstance. um
Right.
it's for want of some training, for want of some education, we could have a lot fewer negative encounters,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
there a lot of issues could be stopped much faster. I
Yeah.
love my
Even just as a
police,
deterrent, right?
and that's exactly it. I love my police. I love my sheriff. They're phenomenal, but they're not near my house.
They're
Um,
minutes away when seconds count, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's not about having the biggest gun. It's not about having whatever. No, it's about knowing what you have, knowing how to use what you have, um, and how to stop the threat. And that's what I tell people. Like, I am not in the business of ending someone's life. I'm not. I am not about to end someone's life. I will stop the threat. Someone may stop being in that endeavor, but that is what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to stop the threat.
Yeah. I mean, that's their choice, not yours, essentially. Right.
Yes,
Uh,
exactly.
yeah. So, all right. Well, we're getting close to running out of time. I think we're going to try to keep it to an hour or under here. One last thing I wanted to ask you about though
Yeah.
was food and preparedness.
Yeah. So, so in my endeavors for the business, I did a whole bunch of different research on different companies and their processes, their qualities, and what ended up going with as far as a manufacturer really doesn't matter. It really comes down to do your own research, figure out what works for you guys. Freeze dried foods are great. The freeze drying process retains the highest percentage of the vitamins of a food. If you go through the process of like dehydrating, you're going to lose a lot. If you can, you're still going to lose a lot. It's great, but you're going to lose a lot of nutrients. Freeze drying is really quite fantastic.
Yeah.
If you have the money to buy your own freeze dryer, that really is an awesome way to go. I mean, honestly, like if you've got a just this massive garden and you don't want to see it all go to pot, or become scraps for the chickens, freeze dry it. Like
Yeah.
it's really good. Yeah, so that's definitely something that I highly recommend.
Well, and take a second and let's think about community again.
Yeah,
You know, freeze dryers are expensive, but if you've got a community who either can all pitch into on it together, or maybe
right.
somebody's got a bit of a processing space and lives nearby, and maybe you could rent it from them. You know, maybe you could have freeze dryer timeshares.
And that was actually one of the when Meg and I were discussing starting up Resilient Living, that was one of the potential iterations that we didn't end up going with, was providing it as a service. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we can buy this. You come to us, and for a fairly nominal fee, it wouldn't take that much. Um, you can buy in, I guess, into the use of our freeze dryer.
Yeah.
Somebody's asking about freeze dryer brands. Okay. There is only one. No. Harvest Try is definitely got the market cornered. Or is it? Yeah, it's Harvest Right, isn't it? Isn't that the name of
Yes.
them?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
Harvest Right is the, yeah.
I've had issues, or I've heard of issues because I don't have one yet, of getting preventative maintenance help. Has been problematic for some people. Um, and because they've got the market share, it's hard to get anything else that is comparable in quality. I've heard there's a new company in Canada. Theirs are much more expensive, but supposedly they're more almost commercial grade, like they're like almost like a prosumer level. But I haven't seen that actually validated. They did a huge push on TikTok over the last couple of months. I want to actually get my hands on or see someone else who's gotten their hands on one before I actually trust, a big, social media push.
Right. Especially TikTok.
I know, right?
Um, yeah, so my experience from talking to people who've used them, because I know quite a few people who have
Yeah.
the upgraded pumps are really seem to be really valuable. So you can get an upgraded
Oh yeah,
pump,
yeah. The
vacuum
oilless
pump.
ones.
Yep, the
Yeah.
oilless vacuum pumps apparently make a pretty big difference, and they're not extremely expensive, at least compared to the cost of the unit itself.
Right.
So I would look at that as a possible thing to think about. For the most part, the people who I know who are using them have been pretty happy with them, with fairly few issues, and they're pretty complex machine. Another
Mhm.
thing that I see people running into is, at least here in Tennessee, things get pretty hot. That's when production starts happening, and these devices put off a ton of heat.
Oh
Um,
yes.
so, if you're using them in a room, oftentimes that room gets so hot that the device gets too hot, and that can be a real problem. So keep that in mind too. Either it needs to be used in a conditioned space or a very well ventilated space, to make sure
Yes.
that it works properly. Or if you can, holding off until later, later in the season when it starts to cool down, is an option as well.
Sure. Well, yeah, and like so, I know a lot of guys who do freeze drying, especially of like produce and things. They'll freeze the stuff ahead of time just because it cuts down on the cycle time. Well,
Yep.
if you can freeze it, then you can wait until winter or fall when it's cooler to be able to process your stuff. So yeah, get a big deep freeze and just wait.
Yeah, and one of the things you can do to freeze these, just a quick little tip, is you get the big cookie trays. Let's see if I'm in the
Yeah.
shot there. The big cookie trays, and take whether it's berries or whatever else, you spread them out on that tray so that they're not clumped together. So if it's
Right.
berries, beans, you don't
Yeah,
just
you want
throw them
them
in a
thin.
yeah, you don't just throw them in a tub. You want to make them so that they're easy to separate. And when you put them in the freeze dryer, you're right. That actually is it saves a ton of time and wear and tear on the machine because the freezer, the just standard chest freezer, is going to do a lot of that work for the device.
Yeah. Yeah, and any kind of a fruit, especially like berries, like you said, that has a thicker skin, you can pierce the skin and that'll allow that moisture a means to get out.
Yeah,
Because in that freeze drying process, you're extracting all of the moisture, but it needs a way out. So yeah.
exactly. Well, Jared, did you have any other thoughts on preparedness that we didn't hit on that you wanted to make sure to cover?
My own I'll say the only other thing I was, the likelihood scenario
Yeah, walk
question.
me through that. I saw that, but I didn't quite
I actually
understand. So,
it was a question I wanted to ask you.
okay.
Was so scenario. What is the likelihood of an issue that you foresee happening on a local level and on a national level? So, like for instance, if I was on the West Coast, I would say fire, right?
Yeah.
If I was in Louisiana, tornado or hurricane.
Yep.
So, what kinds of and we kind of already touched on this a little bit. Um, the likelihood of a local issue, flash floods, whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I'd
then
say
my
local issues are the biggest. Like here, it's going to be wind, tornadoes, kind of the same thing. Um, down trees, down which mean down power lines
yeah,
and limited access. So where it's fairly hilly, and so you don't really have a lot of roads around. Oftentimes, you only have one or two ways through. So that can be a major issue with down power lines, down trees. Ice can be a really big one.
that's a good
Yeah.
one. Yes.
Because that can keep you, if let's say we have an ice storm right on the beginning of a cold front, and that cold front lasts 3 weeks, and I'm back in the holler, I'm not getting out for 3 weeks. So I better
Right.
have what I need to make that happen. Not only
Yep.
what I need, but I should probably be thinking about some of my neighbors who
Yes.
might show up at my door going, "Hey, you're that prepper guy, right?" I'm like, "No, I'm not the prepper guy. I'm the homestead guy."
That's right.
Um, and so yeah, I mean, having enough feed for my chickens, and
Mhm.
especially in the winter because I'm not making feed, I'm not getting as much off the land for them. So having feed for the chickens, having feed for ourselves, being able to run a generator long enough to keep batteries topped off or keep my freezers running, and even though it's cold, and I might not be cold enough during certain parts of the day to keep my food outside. It might still thaw out, especially in the sun. So,
Right.
yeah, just I think ice storm or snowstorm are probably the longest term
Yeah.
local catastrophes I can think of.
Yep.
Um, the others can be a bigger deal. I mean, I was up in Cookville after the big tornadoes in 2020,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there's an entire row of houses that was lifted up, smashed together, and just in one giant pile.
Yeah. It was
Um,
bad.
yeah, it was really bad, and those people couldn't bug in. So those are things we need to think about on a national scale. I'm not as concerned about unrest as maybe some people are. I'm more concerned about energy issues and financial issues. And
Yeah.
so having something to trade or some way of trading and bartering is and building a network for that again comes back to community. Um, those are things I'm more concerned about, at least out where I am. If I was in Nashville, I'd be more concerned about civil unrest. But
Sure. Sure. Yeah. No. And we're seeing it right now. Actually, is the cyber vulnerabilities that we have, whether that's electrical infrastructure vulnerabilities or monetary vulnerabilities. Maybe don't keep all of your money in the bank. Maybe that's a good question. Okay, we'll
it
come back
is.
to that. Um um we there's definitely some vulnerabilities there that can be I kind of like compensated for, but it prepared for,
Mhm.
um, without breaking the bank,
Yeah.
with just a little bit of forethought.
Yeah, $100 bill or junk silver, like a several $100 bills or $20
Yeah,
bills or whatever, some
yeah,
junk silver, things like that, that you just have access to. I wouldn't put so much that you're risking your safety for having it in your house, but
right.
have a few things on hand so that if you need to have a means of account during a power outage, you have the way to. So, all right, yeah, I agree. It's hey, you're that guy. We'll just show up at your house is not really a
Yeah, please don't.
preparedness. Yeah, please don't show up at my house. You might get some old crappy rice and beans, but that's about it. Unless you have something to contribute. So
Well, and that's my whole argument about the community. If we're already established, if we have already developed this community rapport, then that whole conversation is moot. It's not
right.
necessary. And anybody who does show up, um, who they're meandering through, they're not one of us. Like, sorry, but you really got to,
Yeah, keep
get
moving.
your house in order. You should have already gotten your house in order. As far as the gray man though, there's some good ones. I'm trying to think. I was looking and I don't see it. I want to say it was Dirty Civilians YouTube channel did a gray man video. I'm fairly confident it was that. Uh, Grand Thumb also had one that was a gray gray man video. Um, and my whole thought on the gray man is if there was unrest and you are in an urban environment, is that's a means of extraction, is to get out without being noticed. Um, so there's definitely some good resources on there. Do you want smaller bills? Yes, you want to have denominations that allow you varying degree of barter. We'll say you don't want to just have hundreds,
Yeah,
because otherwise that's exactly what they're going to want for whatever it is that they're selling. Is of course they're going to want the 100. Like,
exactly.
no,
Yeah, and
bottle of water is not worth
you
a
keep
100.
the roughly appropriate bills in your pocket for the thing you're about to buy, so that when you pull it out, you're not dropping hundreds on the ground, right?
Yes, seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I was going to say, when because you mentioned gray man, is
Yeah.
it's really important. I personally think, like, I see so many people trying to prepare, and they're like, "I'm going to get the whole house generator and a propane
Oh,
tank,"
oh
and I'm
yes.
like, "So you can run your AC and watch Netflix? I mean, why? Why
Right.
not get a small generator? You know, small quiet generator that you can run
Small,
for
quiet.
weeks instead
Yep.
of a couple of days."
Solar
And
bank or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then you don't want to be the person with a loud generator going and every single light on, and your
No.
AC running. You paint a target on your back that way. So that's
Yeah.
that's a valid point to.
Evaluate your needs, not your
Mhm.
wants,
Right.
and size accordingly. Give yourself some headroom, absolutely, but you don't need to have your 80-inch TV and
No.
your 60-inch. Well, the kids need to watch that. No, they
Yeah.
don't.
And you can, if you oversize your generator just a little bit, you can throw a cord over if you're in like suburbia or urban areas, you can throw a cord over the fence to your neighbors and say, "Hey, plug a fan in.
Right?
Don't plug a bunch more in, or keep your
Yeah.
refrigerator going." But that can buy you a lot of favor with people too. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, generators are an interesting topic, and power
Oh,
generation. So
when
yeah,
there was a really bad snowstorm up in Cookville, and we were getting all set up with my church to trailer generators from house to house with people who they didn't have power to run their refrigerator. So we were just going to
Mhm.
go house to house and let them get their refrigerator up and going, get it cold, and then go on to the next house. And
Yeah,
we didn't end up needing to, but it was something that we had already thought of and had our all planned out. Like, okay, it's go time. Let's grab this stuff. Like, I had my generator, I had my trailer, I had my Jeep. I'm like, all right, let's go.
yeah, nice. All right, I think we got one last question. Did you see this one come through, Jared?
Oh, okay. New City. Oh, ooh,
New York. That's a
that's a
tough one. That's
rough.
going to take some planning.
Okay, so there's some specifics here. Do you know what a Silcock key is? So one of the biggest things that I see in the urban environment is people don't have a means of getting good water, but every um, public building is going to have all the water faucets, but none of them have heads. Go on Amazon and buy a Silcock key. It's a little X-shaped um, piece of metal. It has square holes on top, bottom, left, right, and they're different sizes that you'll be able to access for water. Because that's one of the biggest things, especially like New York City. That'd be so hard to get in and out of there. You need water. You're going to need water. So have a life straw or something and get a silk cookie. The other one is, did you know that like all tractors and heavy equipment, they just use a generic key, and that key rings are available on Amazon that have all of those keys. Do with that what you will, but a heavy equipment can move with some stuff out of the way. If you need to get out.
Yeah, it looks like it's EDC, so that's
There you
great.
go.
Good job.
Okay, good.
Yep. Cool. Well, I think that about wraps it up. Jared, can you tell people who are watching what you do, where they can find you, all that good stuff?
Sure. So I run a store, resilientliving.com. And we have a storefront here in Middle Tennessee, right off 111, between Spencer and Sparta. Basically, we inventory adventure and survival equipment. So it could be everything from tarps to freeze dried foods, knives. I just started the process of getting my firearms license. So I'll be doing gunsmithing and firearm sales. Um, I have a huge array of books that have been mostly vetted out by Ryan. That because it's really, and this is basically what we've been talking about. It's education. Get educated, build the experience, get the equipment in that order. Don't just, I watch all these Grand Thumb videos or T-Rex arms or whomever, and like I watch like, oh, if I get that equipment, that'll make me shoot like them, right? No, a Grand Thumb equipped with a Ruger 1022 would still kill me even if I had a 4 foot a full auto. Like it's equipment. The equipment is not nearly as important as the experience and the knowledge. So get out there, get training, and so that's something we're trying to do. Is we're trying to connect the people that come into the shop with those who have the knowledge. And so we did our CPR class. Gonna have a ham radio class here shortly, firearms class for beginners, for women who want to conceal carry. So yeah, that's it. And you can follow us Resilient Living on YouTube. I think I posted the link to our YouTube channel in the chat. You can follow us on Facebook. Search us out, Resilient Living. That's live in, not living, because someone already had taken that one.
Yep.
And yeah, that's what we're at.
Cool. And where can so people who are not in Sparta, Spencer, Upper Cumberland, where can they find your stuff if they can't get into your shop?
Yeah. So you can go to our website, and our website has our entire inventory, and we will ship it to you. So www.resilientliving.com.
Cool. Thank you. All right. I am Ryan Steva. I'm the owner of the Homestead Consultant, and I help people uh, hopefully save a lot of money, hassle, headache, and problems in setting up homesteads. I help people make decisions, figure out what their true priorities are, and make those goals happen in a logical way. Really, just make things easier for you and make things more productive more quickly. So you can find my information at thehomesteadconsultant.com. Pretty much any social that I'm on, it's going to be at the Homestead Consultant, and if you search that on YouTube, TikTok, whatever, you'll find me. So I think that pretty much wraps it up. Thanks for hanging out with me, Jared.
Heck yeah, anytime.
All right. Thanks everybody for being here. And we love the comments. Thanks everybody for contributing. And we'll talk to you next time.
Alrighty.